The hum of the crowd at the Galleria del Leone was a familiar symphony to Alara, a blend of hushed admiration, clinking glasses, and the low thrum of conversation. Yet tonight, it felt different. It was her symphony, composed around the quiet power of her sculptures. She moved through the throng, a ghost in her own triumph, her hand unconsciously smoothing the rich, dark velvet of her dress. The fabric, a deep sapphire that shimmered almost black in the gallery lights, felt like a second skin, a comforting weight against her. It was a dress she usually reserved for moments of profound introspection or bold declaration, and tonight, it was both. Her gaze drifted to her latest piece, Echo, a figure carved from alabaster, its form emerging from the stone as if born of a dream, its surface polished to a satiny translucence that seemed to capture and hold the very light of the room. A tremor of satisfaction, potent and pure, ran through her. This was her truth, laid bare. She paused by the tall archway leading to the quieter, more intimate salon, where lesser-known Renaissance masters' sketches were displayed. Here, the light was softer, filtered through heavy brocade curtains, lending an almost sacred hush to the space. The air was thick with the scent of old paper, polished wood, and something else, something subtly masculine and complex, like distant pipe smoke mingled with spiced amber. It was a scent that caught her, drawing her in, a promise of hidden depths. He stood with his back to her, silhouetted against a softly lit vitrine. Tall, with broad shoulders that tapered to a lean waist, he exuded an understated elegance that was almost anachronistic in its perfection. His dark suit, impeccably tailored, seemed to absorb the ambient light, rendering him a figure of profound shadow and grace. He wasn't merely observing the sketches, he was communing with them, his head tilted slightly, a hand tucked into his pocket. There was a quiet intensity about him that resonated with something deep within Alara. He wasn't performing for the room. He was simply being. A woman with a laugh like wind chimes moved past Alara, momentarily breaking the spell. Alara drew a shallow breath, the intriguing scent now closer, stronger. She felt a curious pull, a magnetic force drawing her towards the shadowed figure. He turned then, slowly, as if sensing her presence, his movement fluid and deliberate. Alara's breath hitched. His eyes, the color of aged whiskey, met hers across the low-lit room, and the world, for a long, suspended moment, seemed to shrink to just the two of them. There was an intelligence there, a profound depth that seemed to understand unspoken things, to see directly into the landscape of her soul. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a subtle curve that sent a shiver tracing its way down her spine. It wasn't a smile of polite recognition, but one of knowing, of shared secret. His hair was dark, almost black, falling across his forehead in a way that hinted at a slight wildness beneath the polished exterior. A strand of silver at his temple caught the light, a single elegant testament to time. The line of his jaw was strong, his mouth full but firm, capable of both severity and astonishing tenderness, she instinctively felt. Everything about him spoke of a considered, deliberate existence. He began to walk towards her, slowly, without haste, yet with an undeniable sense of purpose. Each step was a measured beat in the rhythm that was now accelerating in Alara's chest. Her velvet dress, once a comfort, now felt like a second skin of heightened awareness, every nerve ending alive. "Good evening," he said, his voice a low, resonant baritone, exactly as she had imagined it might be. It was like the murmur of cello strings, rich and deep, carrying a hint of something ancient and refined. "I believe I'm in the presence of the artist." He stopped a few feet from her, close enough for her to fully appreciate the scent that had first drawn her, and to see the intricate flecks of gold in his irises. His gaze was unwavering, yet not intrusive. It was an invitation, not a demand. "Alara Vance," she managed, her voice a little breathy, surprised by the sudden tremor that had taken hold. "And you are—" "Julian Thorne," he replied, extending a hand. His fingers were long, elegant, with neatly kept nails. When his palm met hers, a jolt, electric and immediate, shot up her arm. His skin was warm, firm, and the touch lingered, a subtle caress that was more than just a polite greeting. It was a connection, undeniable and potent. "It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Ilara," he said, his thumb brushing lightly over the back of her hand before he slowly released it. The warmth of his touch remained, a ghost on her skin. "I've been admiring your work for some time, albeit from a distance." "You have?" she asked, a flicker of surprise mingling with the burgeoning intrigue. "How so?" He offered that subtle, knowing smile again. "I have a particular interest in contemporary sculpture, especially those pieces that speak of both fragility and resilience. Your Echo is a masterclass in that duality. It captures the essence of a whisper made tangible, of memory given form." Ilara felt a flush rise to her cheeks. Few people truly understood the heart of her work, the vulnerable essence she poured into each piece. His words were not mere compliments, they were an articulation of her own deeply held artistic philosophy. "You see it," she murmured, almost to herself. "I do," he confirmed, his eyes never leaving hers. "And I feel it, the raw, beautiful ache of it." He gestured towards the main hall, where Echo stood bathed in the brighter lights. "It's as though the stone itself has learned to breathe." He took a step closer, and Ilara's senses sharpened. She could feel the subtle radiation of his body heat, a comforting warmth in the cool gallery air. The velvet of her dress seemed to hum against her skin. "Your work has a distinctive signature," he continued, his voice dropping to a slightly lower register, as if sharing a confidence. "A deep connection to the tactile, the sensual. Even in a piece as ethereal as Echo, there's a profound sense of touch, of surface, of texture. I believe art should engage all the senses," Ilara found herself saying, her voice gaining strength, drawn out by his perceptive insight. "Not just the eye. It should be felt, almost tasted." "Precisely," he said, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips, then returning to her eyes. "A philosophy I share in many aspects of life." He paused, then gestured towards the quiet corner they occupied. "May I steal a moment of your time, Ilara Vance, away from the clamor? I confess, I find myself rather captivated by more than just your sculpture tonight." His words, delivered with such elegant candor, sent a fresh wave of heat through her. He was direct, yet utterly charming. He wasn't merely flirting, he was acknowledging a connection that already existed, an unspoken current that had sparked between them. I would like that very much, Julian Thorne," she replied, a genuine smile finally gracing her lips, feeling a delightful flutter in her stomach. He offered his arm, a gesture both old-fashioned and utterly graceful. As her hand rested lightly on his forearm, she felt the firm muscle beneath the fabric of his suit. It was a small touch, yet it radiated a quiet strength that was deeply reassuring, surprisingly so. He led her to a secluded alcove near a large window, overlooking the illuminated cityscape. The light here was even dimmer, casting long, soft shadows. Two antique velvet armchairs, plush and inviting, faced each other across a low, polished table where an abandoned champagne flute still stood, catching the faint glint of the city lights. "Please," he offered, gesturing to one of the chairs. The velvet, a deep emerald, looked almost black in the shadows, its nap inviting. Ilara sank into it, the soft embrace of the fabric mirroring the gentle unraveling she felt within herself. Julian took the opposite chair, leaning back with an easy grace that suggested comfort in any environment. The proximity, the intimacy of the setting intensified the connection. She could clearly see the play of shadows across his strong features, the subtle movement of his dark lashes. "Tell me, Ilara," he began, his voice a silken thread in the quiet, "what drew you to sculpture, to the challenge of coaxing beauty from resistance?" "It's the dialogue with the material," she explained, her initial shyness receding, replaced by the passion for her craft. "The way stone or clay pushes back, demands respect. It's not about imposing my will, but discovering what's already there hidden within. It's a dance of unveiling." "A dance," he repeated, savoring the word. His gaze was incredibly attentive, making her feel as though every word she uttered was the most fascinating thing he had ever heard. "And what does the stone unveil about you, the artist?" Elara considered this, a slight furrow appearing between her brows. Perhaps a striving for honesty, a desire to strip away artifice and reveal the raw core of emotion, and a deep appreciation for beauty in all its forms, even the broken or imperfect. "A beautiful answer," he said, his eyes darkening slightly, a hint of something deeper, more personal, flashing within them. "I find myself drawn to that same honesty, in art, in people, in moments." He leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped loosely. The gesture was open, inviting. "Tell me more about your process. The initial spark, the long, arduous shaping, the final, revealing polish." She found herself speaking freely, sharing insights she rarely articulated, feeling an uncanny sense of being completely understood. She spoke of the weight of the stone, the dust that coated her skin, the aching muscles, the solitary hours. He listened, utterly absorbed, occasionally interjecting with a perceptive question that showed he wasn't just hearing her words, but truly comprehending the spirit behind them. "And the velvet dress," he interjected softly, after she had described the final, painstaking polish of echo. His eyes flickered down her form, a slow, appreciative journey that felt less like an appraisal and more like a tactile exploration. "Does it, too, have a story? A particular significance?" Elara felt her cheeks warm again. "It's a comfort, a protection sometimes, and a statement, I suppose. It feels substantial, luxurious, but also deeply sensual. It reminds me to feel, to be present in my own skin." "A truly remarkable fabric," Julian mused, his gaze still holding hers. "It absorbs light, yet reflects it in a way that suggests hidden depths. It's soft to the touch, yet has a certain resilience, and its texture, it evokes a profound sense of intimacy, doesn't it?" His words, so precise, so knowing, made her heart quicken. He wasn't just talking about the fabric, he was talking about the sensation, the feeling it evoked, the way it could make one feel. And in doing so, he was speaking directly to the unspoken sensuality that hummed between them. "It does," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She found herself unable to look away from his eyes, which held a warmth that seemed to envelop her. "I find myself fascinated by textures," Julian continued, his voice a low, caressing murmur. "The grain of old wood, the cool smoothness of marble, the rough beauty of a raw canvas, and of course, the yielding softness of velvet." He paused, his gaze dropping to her hand, which rested lightly on the armrest of her chair. "There's a certain pleasure in the discovery of such things, isn't there? In tracing the contours, in feeling the subtle friction, the quiet surrender." His words were laced with a delicate double meaning, an invitation woven into a simple statement about aesthetics. Elara felt a delicious tremor pass through her. He wasn't just talking about inanimate objects. He was speaking of touch, of intimacy, of the sensual landscape of the human body. The air between them crackled, thick with unspoken desires. The gallery, the other guests, the city lights outside, they all faded into a distant hum. There was only Julian, his intense gaze, his deep voice, and the potent, undeniable current that flowed between them. "Yes," Elara managed, her throat suddenly dry. "A profound pleasure." He leaned back slightly, a subtle shift that somehow made him seem even more commanding. "I have a collection of sorts," he offered, changing the subject, yet not truly breaking the spell. "Not of art precisely, but of beautiful objects that tell stories, pieces of history, fragments of passion. Many of them share that same tactile quality you speak of. Rare books with leather bindings worn smooth by generations of hands. Ancient textiles, their patterns almost faded, but their weave still whispering of long-ago weavers, and yes, a great deal of velvet." A flicker of a smile played on his lips. "Perhaps one day, you might allow me to show them to you. I believe you would appreciate the quiet poetry they hold." The invitation hung in the air, weighted with more than just the promise of an art collection. It was an invitation into his world, into his private spaces, into a deeper connection. Ilara's heart thudded against her ribs. "I would like that very much, Julian," she said, her voice steadier now, infused with a quiet resolve. The thought of stepping into his sanctuary, of seeing the things he cherished, of sharing that intimate space with him, sent a thrill through her. He smiled then, a full, genuine smile that softened the intensity of his features and revealed a warmth that was utterly captivating. "Excellent. I look forward to it." His gaze lingered on her, warm and appraising. "But for now, the evening is still young, and I find myself with a sudden, overwhelming desire to continue our conversation, perhaps over something a little more substantial than champagne." He rose from his chair, a fluid, unhurried movement, and extended his hand to her once more. This time, as her fingers found his, she felt the subtle pressure of his thumb against her palm, a tender stroke that sent a wave of heat through her veins. He pulled her gently to her feet, bringing her closer than before, their bodies almost brushing. The scent of him enveloped her, intoxicating and alluring. "There's a quiet little place not far from here," he murmured, his voice a conspiratorial whisper, his gaze dropping to her lips once more. "Known for its privacy, its exquisite wine list, and its rather excellent chocolate soufflé. Would you care to join me, Ilara Vance, and perhaps allow me to further explore the fascinating landscape of your mind?" The question was innocent enough on the surface, but the unspoken undertone, the lingering gaze, the subtle pressure of his hand, spoke volumes. It was an invitation to a different kind of intimacy, a quiet escalation of the undeniable connection that had sparked between them. And in that moment, standing so close to him, feeling the electric hum of his presence, Ilara knew there was only one possible answer. "Yes," she breathed, the word a soft whisper that seemed to absorb all the ambient sounds of the room, leaving only the rush of blood in her ears and the resonant beat of her own heart. It was a sound so fragile, so utterly sincere, that it surprised even her. It wasn't a hesitant yes, but a firm, almost eager affirmation born from a deep, instinctual knowing. Julian's thumb, which had been resting lightly on the back of her hand, moved in a slow, hypnotic circle, sending shivers tracing a path up her arm. A smile, slow and incredibly tender, bloomed on his lips, mirroring the warmth that was rapidly unfurling within her chest. His eyes, those deep pools of midnight and starlight, held hers, a silent conversation passing between them that transcended words. There was relief there, a quiet triumph, and something else, something akin to profound tenderness. "Good," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her, "because I confess, Ilara, I was rather hoping for that answer." He didn't pull her closer, didn't make any sudden moves to break the delicate spell. Instead, he simply held her gaze, allowing the moment to breathe, to deepen, to settle into the very marrow of their bones. "May I suggest we find a more comfortable place to explore this landscape?" His eyes flickered towards the plush velvet sofa, nestled by the grand fireplace, where a low, inviting fire now crackled, casting dancing shadows across the room. Ilara nodded, her throat suddenly dry. The idea of moving, of breaking this exquisite stillness, felt both daunting and utterly irresistible. It was a step further into the unknown, a silent agreement to shed the last vestiges of polite distance. Her hand, still cradled in his, felt like a beacon, a warm, guiding anchor, as he gently led her away from the moonlit window. The short journey across the Persian rug felt like an odyssey. Each soft step was deliberate, charged with unspoken anticipation. The scent of woodsmoke mingled with the subtle, sophisticated aroma of his cologne, creating an intoxicating blend that wrapped around her, pulling her deeper into his orbit. When they reached the sofa, he didn't release her hand immediately. He waited, his touch a silent question, until she settled onto the soft cushions, the firelight warming her face. Only then did he move to sit beside her, not too close, but close enough that the warmth of his presence was a palpable thing. The silence that followed not awkward, but rich, heavy with unspoken desires and burgeoning emotions. Ilara found herself tracing the intricate patterns on the velvet armrest. Her senses hyper-aware of his every subtle movement, the quiet rustle of his suit jacket, the steady rhythm of his breathing. The fire crackled, a companionable sound, its flames reflecting in the polished surfaces of the antique furniture, painting the room in hues of amber and gold. "Tell me," Julian began, his voice soft, coaxing, "what fascinates you most about the world, Ilara? What thoughts keep you company when the world outside grows quiet?" He leaned back slightly, his arm resting along the top of the sofa, his posture open, inviting. His gaze was gentle, but intensely focused, as if he were trying to read the very essence of her soul. Ilara found herself relaxing, drawn in by his genuine curiosity. "That's a profound question, Julian," she mused, a small wry smile playing on her lips. "I suppose it's the hidden narratives, the stories beneath the surface. Whether it's the history embedded in an old building, the untold tales in a stranger's eyes, or the intricate dance of human emotions, I find myself perpetually drawn to what lies beneath." She paused, then met his gaze, a vulnerability shining through. "And you? What hidden landscapes do you find yourself exploring?" He returned her smile, a slow, appreciative curve of his lips that sent a fresh wave of warmth through her. "Much the same, I think. Though perhaps my exploration tends to be more structural. I see the world as a series of interconnected systems, each with its own hidden levers and gears. What drives people? What shapes their decisions? The invisible currents that steer our lives. That is what truly captures my imagination. His eyes held a flicker of something deeper, something that spoke of a keen intellect and a profound understanding of human nature. "And sometimes," he added, his voice dropping to a lower register, "I find myself wondering about the individual, unique landscapes. Like yours, Ilara, a landscape that promises both breathtaking beauty and intriguing complexity." The compliment, delivered with such quiet sincerity, made her blush, a faint flush rising on her cheeks. She felt herself utterly seen, understood in a way she rarely experienced. "You have a way with words, Julian," she whispered, her gaze dropping for a moment to the flickering fire, before bravely lifting to meet his once more. "You peel back the layers with such precision." "And you," he countered, his voice a warm caress, "have a way of revealing them without even trying. A certain luminosity, Ilara. It's quite captivating." As he spoke, his hand, which had been resting on the sofa back, moved slowly, deliberately. His fingertips brushed against a loose strand of hair that had escaped her elegant chignon. A feather-light touch that sent a jolt through her. He didn't pull it back immediately. Instead, his fingers lingered, tracing the curve of her temple, the delicate line of her jaw, before gently tucking the strand behind her ear. The simple gesture was electrifying. Her breath hitched, and she could feel the rapid thump-thump of her heart against her ribs. His touch was warm, gentle, yet utterly confident, a silent assertion of intimacy that bypassed all pretense. Her skin tingled where his fingers had grazed, a delicious residual warmth that spread through her veins. She felt a magnetic pull, an invisible tether drawing her closer to him, her body subtly leaning into his space. His eyes, dark and fathomless, held hers, reading every nuance of her reaction. He didn't rush, didn't push. He simply watched, a slow, knowing smile deepening the lines around his eyes. "You have such expressive eyes, Ilara," he murmured, his voice a low, seductive whisper that seemed to vibrate through the very air between them. "They tell a story even when your lips are silent." She found she couldn't speak, her throat too tight, her mind reeling from the intensity of his gaze, the lingering ghost of his touch. All she could do was gaze back, allowing her own eyes to convey the tumultuous rush of emotion swirling within her, the surprise, the burgeoning desire, the undeniable fascination. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he shifted, turning more fully towards her. The space between them, already diminishing, seemed to shrink further. His other hand, the one that had held hers earlier, now rested gently on her knee, a soft, reassuring weight through the fabric of her dress. It wasn't a possessive touch, but a tender claim, a silent promise. "May I tell you a secret, Alara?" he asked, his voice softer still, almost a breath. She swallowed, nodding her assent. "Please." "From the moment I saw you tonight," he began, his thumb tracing a slow, hypnotic pattern on her knee, "I felt a pull. A sense of recognition, as if I had been waiting for you, without even knowing it. It's not often that one encounters such a profound connection, is it?" His gaze was unwavering, earnest, and utterly captivating. Her own heart swelled with a similar sentiment. "No," she agreed, her voice barely a whisper. "It's not." She felt a sudden, fierce urge to reach out, to touch him, to bridge the remaining distance between them. Her fingers twitched, but she held back, allowing him to lead, to set the pace of this exquisite dance. His eyes dropped to her lips, lingering there for a moment, a silent question. The air between them crackled with an almost unbearable tension, a palpable hum of unspoken desires. Her own lips parted slightly, a soft sigh escaping her, an invitation she hadn't consciously voiced. Then slowly, with an exquisite deliberation that made her heart pound against her ribs, he leaned in. The world outside the cozy firelit room seemed to fade into a distant hum. All that existed was Julian, his scent, the warmth radiating from his body, and the anticipation that tightened every nerve ending. She closed her eyes for a fleeting second, savoring the slow approach, the gentle brush of his breath against her cheek, laden with the subtle scent of mint and something uniquely warm him. When his lips finally met hers, it was not a sudden rush, but a tender, hesitant exploration. Soft, warm, and infinitely gentle, his mouth moved against hers, a tentative question, a silent plea. She responded instantly, her own lips parting further, melting into his, a sigh escaping her that was half relief, half burgeoning desire. It was a kiss that tasted of quiet promises and long-held anticipation. It was soft at first, a delicate dance of discovery, but quickly deepened as her hands, as if with a will of their own, found their way to his shoulders, clinging to the soft wool of his jacket. His hand on her knee moved, sliding slowly upwards over the silken fabric of her dress, until it rested on her thigh, his thumb gently caressing the soft skin just above her knee. The other hand, which had been resting on the sofa back, now moved to cradle the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her gently but firmly as the kiss deepened. A soft moan escaped her throat, a sound she barely recognized as her own, as the world tilted on its axis. His lips became more insistent, more passionate, moving with a confident tenderness that utterly disarmed her. She felt herself yielding, utterly and completely, to the intoxicating pleasure of his kiss. His tongue, warm and velvet soft, traced the delicate curve of her lower lip, a silent request that she answered by parting her lips further, inviting him in. And when their tongues finally met, it was like the convergence of two long-separated rivers, a swirling, intoxicating current that pulled her deeper into the eddy of sensation. It was a kiss of profound connection, of exquisite yearning, of a shared understanding that transcended mere physical attraction. She tasted wine, and something else, a subtle sweetness, a hint of spice uniquely Julian. Her fingers tightened on his shoulders, pulling him closer, wanting to eliminate every last fraction of an inch between them. She felt the hard planes of his chest against her, the strength of his body, and a thrill shot through her. The world outside the circle of their embrace ceased to exist. There was only the warmth of his mouth, the intoxicating press of his body, the frantic beat of her own heart echoing in her ears. He broke the kiss slowly, reluctantly, pulling back just enough for their foreheads to rest against each other. Their breaths mingled, ragged and uneven. His eyes, still closed, fluttered open, dark and luminous, reflecting the firelight. A slow, contented smile spread across his face, a smile that spoke volumes of shared pleasure. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice hoarse, thick with emotion. "You are exquisite." His thumb, still resting on her thigh, began a slow, sensual stroke, sending shivers through her. She felt a delicious warmth pooling low in her belly, a soft ache of longing that had been awakened by his kiss. Her eyes, still slightly dazed, met his, and she saw mirrored in their depths a desire as potent and consuming as her own. "Julian," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper, I don't think I've ever felt anything quite like that." He chuckled softly, a low rumble that resonated through her chest. "Nor I, my dear. Not quite like that." He leaned in again, this time pressing a series of soft, lingering kisses to her forehead, her eyelids, the delicate curve of her temple, each one a tender affirmation. "You have a way of unraveling me, Alara, a delightful, dangerous way." Her hands, which had moved from his shoulders, now rested gently on either side of his face, her thumbs tracing the strong line of his jaw. His skin was warm and smooth beneath her touch, and she reveled in the tactile sensation of him. She felt a profound sense of peace settle over her, mingled with a surging excitement for what lay ahead. This felt right, utterly and beautifully right. He shifted slightly, creating a more comfortable embrace, his arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her closer until she was nestled against his side, her head resting on his shoulder. His other hand moved to entwine with hers, his fingers strong and warm around hers. The fire continued its gentle dance, casting a soft golden glow over them, turning the room to a sanctuary of shared intimacy. "Tell me more about your hidden narratives," he murmured, his voice a soft invitation, his lips brushing against her hair. "Tell me everything. I want to know every story, every secret you hold within that beautiful mind of yours." And as she began to speak, her voice soft and hesitant at first, then gaining confidence, as she lost herself in the comfort of his presence, he listened, his gaze unwavering, his fingers gently caressing her hand. His touch was a silent promise, a continuation of the dance that had begun hours ago, now deepened by the intoxicating taste of his kiss. The night was still young, and the landscape of their connection, vast and alluring, stretched out before them, promising endless discoveries. She felt the subtle shift in his weight, the rise and fall of his chest beneath her head, and knew with a certainty that thrilled her to her core that this was only the beginning. The world outside had vanished, leaving only the warmth of the fire, the quiet rhythm of their breathing, and the electric hum of their intertwined souls. He tightened his arm around her, a possessive yet tender gesture, and she leaned into him, utterly content, utterly captivated. The journey had just truly begun. The journey had just truly begun. She didn't know when she drifted to sleep, only that the transition had been seamless, a gentle surrender to the warmth and safety of his embrace. When she stirred, it wasn't to an abrupt awakening, but a slow, delicious unfurling from the depths of a profound peace. The world was still muted, a soft grey light filtering through the window, painting the rough-hewn beams with a nascent glow. The fire had dwindled to a bed of glowing embers, casting a faint pulse-like warmth that seemed to mirror the steady beat of the heart beneath her ear. His arm was still a firm anchor around her, his fingers lightly curled at her side. She felt the subtle tremor of his breathing, deep and even, and a faint woodsy scent, mingled with something uniquely him, filled her senses. It was an intimacy so profound, so utterly natural, that it felt as though they had been waking like this for years. She shifted slightly, just enough to tilt her head and glimpse his face. His features, softened by sleep, were utterly captivating in the dim light. A lock of dark hair had fallen across his forehead, and she felt an almost irresistible urge to brush it back, to trace the line of his jaw. A shiver, not of cold but of exquisite anticipation, traced its way down her spine. This wasn't just physical proximity, it was a soul-deep resonance, a quiet understanding that hummed between them even in slumber. She closed her eyes again, breathing him in, allowing the quiet rhythm of the cabin to envelop her. The soft crackle of a log settling in the hearth, the distant, murmuring whisper of the wind, the almost imperceptible brush of her own hair against his cheek. Every sensation was heightened, every moment imbued with a fragile, beautiful significance. Time seemed to stretch and dissolve in that liminal space between sleep and full wakefulness. She felt him stir then, a deeper breath, a slight tensing of the muscles in his arm. Her own heart gave a hopeful leap. Slowly, languidly, he opened his eyes. They were the color of warm amber in the low light, and they met hers with an immediate, searing intensity. There was no surprise, no awkwardness, only a recognition so ancient it stole her breath. A soft smile, slow and utterly captivating, spread across his lips, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Morning," he murmured, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that sent a delicious shiver through her. It was thick with sleep, yet utterly clear in its warmth. "Morning," she replied, her voice barely a whisper, a little husky. She felt a blush creep up her neck, a sweet heat that had nothing to do with embarrassment and everything to do with the potent pull between them. He tightened his arm, drawing her just a fraction closer. The movement was possessive, yet so tender that it made her chest ache in the most wonderful way. His thumb brushed lightly against her side, a feather-light touch that left a trail of pure sensation. She could feel the hard plane of his chest against her back, the solid warmth of his thigh against hers. It was a cocoon of sensation, a world carved out just for them. "Sleep well?" he asked, his gaze still holding hers unwavering. She nodded, unable to articulate the profound peace she had found in his arms. "Better than I have in years." His smile deepened, a silent acknowledgement of the truth in her words. He leaned in slightly, his breath warm against her temple, and pressed a soft kiss to her hair. It was a simple gesture, yet it spoke volumes of tenderness and burgeoning desire. She felt her body relax even further against his, a quiet surrender. I should get up," she murmured, even as every fiber of her being protested the idea of breaking this perfect stillness. He chuckled, a low, rich sound that vibrated through her. "Or we could just stay here." His fingers began a slow, deliberate journey, tracing the curve of her hip beneath the fabric of her sleepwear. The touch was light, exploratory, yet it sparked a wildfire through her veins. Her breath hitched. "Tempting," she whispered, her voice a little shaky. The air between them was suddenly thick with unspoken desires, with the exquisite tension of a new day dawning on a world forever changed. She could feel the subtle shift in his body, the rising heat, the undeniable proof of his own awakening desire. He leaned in closer still, his lips brushing against her ear. "Very tempting." His voice was a seductive murmur, a promise wrapped in velvet. "But coffee sounds good too." A sigh escaped her, a mix of relief and lingering desire. He was giving her space, allowing the morning to unfold naturally, even as the intensity of their connection thrummed beneath the surface. She appreciated it, the slow, deliberate pace he set, allowing the anticipation to build, rather than rushing headlong to something. It made every touch, every glance, every word, feel infinitely more potent. Slowly, reluctantly, they untangled themselves from the warm embrace of the firs. The chill of the morning air, though gentle, was a stark contrast to the heat of his body, and she shivered delightfully. He rose first, his movements fluid and powerful, stretching like a magnificent predator. Her eyes lingered on the lean planes of his back, the sculpted muscle beneath his skin, the way his sleepwear clung to his form. A purely feminine appreciation bloomed within her. He turned, catching her gaze, and a slow, knowing smile played on his lips. "You okay?" "More than okay," she breathed, meaning it profoundly. He moved to the small kitchen area, the floorboards creaking softly under his weight. The scent of wood smoke still clung to the air, mingling now with the promise of coffee. She watched him, captivated by the easy grace of his movements, as he stoked the embers, added kindling, and soon had a cheerful flame dancing in the hearth. The cabin, with its rustic charm, felt like a sanctuary, a world away from everything she knew. "Coffee or tea?" he asked, turning to her. "Coffee, please," she replied, finally pushing herself to her feet. Her muscles felt wonderfully loose, a testament to the deep sleep she'd enjoyed. She smoothed down her sleepwear, feeling a renewed sense of self-consciousness, yet also a thrilling confidence. He handed her a thick, ceramic mug, its warmth seeping into her hands. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee was intoxicating. She took a grateful sip, leaning against the sturdy wooden counter, and watched him. He was methodically preparing a simple breakfast: thick-cut bread for toast, a bowl of fresh berries, and a small block of local cheese. "There's something incredibly peaceful about this," she said, gesturing vaguely around the cabin. "The quiet, the simplicity." He paused, looking at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "It grounds you, doesn't it? Takes away all the noise, all the distractions?" She nodded, her gaze meeting his over the rim of her mug. "It does. I feel stripped bare, in the best possible way. Just me." "Good," he said, his voice soft. "That's how it should be. Out here, you can just gabe." He gestured to the small rustic table by the window. "Let's eat." They sat across from each other, the morning light pouring in, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The breakfast was simple but delicious, and the conversation flowed easily, light and interspersed with comfortable silences. They talked about their childhoods, about dreams they'd once held and paths they'd chosen. She found herself sharing stories she hadn't told anyone in years, bits of her past that felt safe to reveal in the quiet intimacy of the cabin. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers, offering small smiles or nods of understanding. He, in turn, spoke of his love for this remote land, the solace he found in its raw beauty, the satisfaction of living off the grid, if only for a time. He spoke of the challenges, the solitude, but also the profound rewards. She sensed a deep wisdom in him, an understanding of the world that transcended the superficial. As they finished, he stood and walked to the window, gazing out at the pristine landscape. "The sun's out. It's going to be a beautiful day." She joined him, standing close enough that their shoulders almost brushed. Outside, a gentle mist was lifting from the pine trees, revealing a tapestry of vibrant greens and browns. The air looked crisp and clean, invigorating. "What do you normally do on a day like this?" she asked, her voice hushed. He turned to her, his eyes sparkling. "Well, usually I'd go for a long walk, explore the trails. Sometimes I chop wood, or work on whatever project I've got going in the shed." He paused, his gaze softening. "But today, I was thinking, maybe we could go for a walk. There's a clearing up the ridge, a perfect spot to just sit and watch the world." The idea was instantly appealing. "I'd love that," she said, her heart lifting. They dressed in comfortable, practical clothes, layers against the potentially cool mountain air. As she pulled on her boots, she felt a surge of excitement. This wasn't just a walk, it was an extension of their intimacy, a chance to share in his world, to experience the land he loved with him by her side. He offered his hand as they stepped out onto the small porch, and she took it, her fingers lacing naturally with his. His grip was warm and firm, a reassuring presence. The air was indeed crisp, carrying the scent of pine needles and damp earth. A gentle breeze rustled the leaves, a soft symphony in the quiet morning. They walked in companionable silence for a while, following a narrow path that wound through towering pines and ancient oaks. The sunlight dappled through the canopy, painting shifting patterns on the forest floor. He pointed out different trees, the tracks of animals, the call of a distant bird. She listened, mesmerized, absorbing every detail, every nuance of his voice. Her hand remained in his, a constant, comforting connection. Occasionally, his thumb would brush over her knuckles, a small, electric current passing between them. The simple act of walking together, side by side, felt profound. It was a shared journey, both literal and metaphorical. The path began to climb gently, and soon they reached the ridge he'd spoken of. It opened into a small, sun-drenched clearing, carpeted with soft moss and wild grasses. From this vantage point, the view was breathtaking. Rolling hills stretched out before them, a patchwork of greens and grays, disappearing into the hazy blue distance. A silent, majestic river snaked its way through the valley below, glinting like silver in the sunlight. Wow! She breathed, utterly captivated. It's incredible. He stood behind her, his hands resting lightly on her shoulders, his chin brushing her hair. I told you. His voice was a low murmur against her ear, sending shivers down her neck. She leaned back into him, finding the warmth and solidity of his body a perfect complement to the vastness of the landscape. They stood there for a long time, just watching, absorbing the quiet grandeur of nature. The world felt immense and timeless, yet in his arms she felt utterly grounded, completely present. It was a rare and precious feeling. Finally he led her to a large flat rock at the edge of the clearing. They sat down, hip to hip, their shoulders touching. He pulled a small flask from his pack. Whiskey. She smiled, shaking her head. Not for me, thank you. But it smells good. He took a slow sip, his eyes still on the horizon, a thoughtful expression on his face. Sometimes when things get too loud, too complicated, I come up here. It puts everything back into perspective. I can see why, she said softly, her gaze following his. It makes you feel small, but in a good way. Like part of something much bigger. He turned his head then, his eyes finding hers. Exactly. He reached out, his fingers gently tracing the line of her jaw, his touch light as a butterfly wing. You fit here, you know. Her breath caught in her throat. The casual intimacy of his words, the warmth of his touch, sent a potent wave of emotion through her. Do I? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Yes, he affirmed, his gaze intense, unwavering. Like you were always meant to be here. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to react, to pull away if she wished. But she didn't. She leaned in too, her heart hammering against her ribs. His lips met hers in a soft, tender kiss, a gentle exploration that deepened slowly. It was a kiss full of the crisp morning air, of pine and earth, of unspoken promises. His hand moved from her jaw to cup the back of her head, his fingers tangling in her hair, pulling her closer still. Her hands found their way to his chest, gripping the fabric of his shirt, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her palms. The world outside the clearing, beyond the circle of his arms, faded into insignificance. There was only the warmth of his mouth on hers, the soft sigh that escaped her as the kiss deepened, becoming more insistent, more passionate. He pulled back slightly, just enough to look into her eyes, his breath mingling with hers. We should head back, he murmured, his voice husky with desire, though his gaze held a hint of reluctant duty. I want to show you something else. She nodded, a little breathless, her lips still tingling from his kiss. The day was still young, and the promise in his eyes was intoxicating. The walk back was filled with a different kind of energy, a quiet hum of anticipation. Their hands found each other again, their fingers intertwined, but now there was a subtle tension, an unspoken awareness of the desires that simmered between them. They spoke less, their glances longer, more charged. Back at the cabin, the afternoon light streamed through the windows, illuminating the rustic interior. He led her to a corner she hadn't noticed before, where a collection of intricate wood carvings sat on a small shelf. They were exquisite, detailed pieces, a soaring hawk, a watchful bear, the delicate curve of a fern. You made these? She asked, her voice filled with admiration, tracing the smooth lines of a small, sleeping fox. He nodded, a hint of shyness in his eyes. It's a hobby, something to do when the weather keeps me inside. They're beautiful, she said genuinely, looking from the carvings to him. You have such talent. A warmth spread through her as she realized another layer of this complex, quietly passionate man. He was not just strong and silent, but artistic, thoughtful, connected to the natural world in a profound way. I have something else I want to do, he said, his voice lower now, a subtle shift in the atmosphere. He moved closer, his eyes holding hers. If you're willing. Her heart began to pound a little faster. What is it? He reached out, his fingers brushing a stray strand of hair from her face, letting his touch linger on her cheek. A bath, The water's drawn from the spring heated by the wood stove. It's incredibly relaxing. His thumb stroked gently across her skin. And I thought we could share it. The invitation hung in the air, a silent question, a bold offering. Her breath hitched. The thought of sinking into warm, fragrant water with him, the intimacy of it, sent a delicious shiver through her. It was a step beyond, a deeper plunge into the waters of their shared desire. She met his gaze, a slow, sensual smile spreading across her lips. "I think," she said, her voice a little breathless, "that sounds absolutely perfect." He smiled then, a triumphant, utterly masculine smile that sent a jolt straight to her core. He reached for her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers once more, and led her towards a door she hadn't yet explored, the door to the small, rustic bathroom. Inside, the room was dimly lit by a single candle, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. A clawfoot tub, surprisingly deep and inviting, sat in the center, already filled with steaming water. The air was thick with the scent of pine and something subtly floral, an herbal infusion perhaps. It was an oasis of calm and sensual promise. He released her hand, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'll let you go first," he offered, his voice a low rumble. "I'll just fetch some fresh towels." She nodded, her heart thrumming with anticipation. As he turned to leave the small room, she quickly shed her clothes, her fingers fumbling slightly with the buttons, fueled by a delicious nervousness. The cool air on her skin was quickly replaced by the soft steam rising from the tub. She stepped in, sinking into the glorious warmth, a sigh of pure contentment escaping her lips. The water enveloped her, soothing tired muscles, preparing her for whatever was to come. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth seep into her bones, the fragrant steam filling her lungs. The quiet creak of the door opening brought her back to the present. She opened her eyes to see him standing there, fresh towels draped over his arm, his gaze fixed on her. He was no longer fully clothed. He had removed his shirt, revealing the broad expanse of his chest, muscled and sculpted, lightly dusted with dark hair. Her gaze drifted lower, to the lean line of his torso, the waistband of his trousers. Her breath caught. The sight of him, so powerful and utterly masculine, stirred something deep within her. He walked over to the tub, placing the towels on a nearby stool. His eyes, dark and intense, searched hers. "Is the water okay?" "Perfect," she managed, her voice a little shaky. The space between them felt charged, electric. He reached out, his fingers brushing the surface of the water, testing its temperature. His touch was so close, so tantalizing. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, the subtle scent of him filling the small room. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, his voice a low murmur, a question that was more of a delicious formality. Her gaze met his, a silent invitation passing between them. "I was hoping you would." A slow, sensual smile spread across his face, a look of pure, unadulterated desire. He shed his remaining clothes with an unhurried grace, his movements deliberate, utterly confident. She watched him, captivated, her gaze tracing every line, every curve of his magnificent body. He was a vision of masculine beauty, lean and powerful, with a raw, untamed edge that thrilled her to her core. He stepped into the tub, the water rising around him, spilling over the sides with a soft splash. He sat facing her, his long legs stretching out, his knees brushing against hers. The tub was generous, but not so large that they weren't intimately close. The warmth of the water, the steam, the scent of pine and herbs, and now the undeniable heat of his body. It was an intoxicating blend of sensations. Their eyes locked, a silent conversation passing between them, a crescendo of unspoken desires. He reached out, his hand finding hers beneath the water, his fingers intertwining. The touch was soft, yet incredibly potent, sending shivers through her. "This is nice," he murmured, his voice low and rich, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "More than nice," she whispered, her gaze dropping to his chest, then back to his eyes. The water, swirling around them, felt like a living thing, a warm embrace that held them in its sensual depths. The flickering candlelight cast their forms in a soft, golden glow, making the moment feel timeless, sacred. He shifted slightly, leaning in closer, the water between them rippling softly. His other hand lifted, his fingers gently tracing the curve of her neck, then moving to cup her jaw. His touch was tender, yet firm, a promise of deeper intimacy. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his eyes dark with admiration, his gaze sweeping over her face, lingering on her lips. Her breath hitched. The directness of his words, the honesty in his eyes made her heart swell. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering closed for a moment, savoring the sensation of his skin against hers, the warmth of his breath on her cheek. When her eyes opened again, they were sparkling with a desire that mirrored his own. He was so close now, she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the subtle tension in his muscles. The air in the small room was thick with anticipation, with the unspoken question of what would happen next. He leaned in further, slowly, deliberately, giving her every opportunity to pull away. But she had no desire to. Her own hand rose, her fingers tangling in the damp hair at the nape of his neck, pulling him gently, irresistibly, closer. Their lips met, not in a tentative exploration this time, but with a hunger that had been simmering between them all day. The kiss was deep, passionate, full of the accumulated longing of hours, of days, of a lifetime. His mouth moved over hers with a confident expertise that made her whole body hum. She responded with an equal fervor, parting her lips, inviting him in. His tongue met hers, a soft, sensual dance that sent a wave of exquisite pleasure through her. His hand tightened on her jaw, holding her steady, while his other arm wrapped around her waist, pulling her closer still, until their bodies were pressed together in the warm, swirling water. Her breasts brushed against his chest, the sensation electrifying. The water, the steam, the scent of him. The taste of him. It was an overwhelming assault on her senses, utterly intoxicating. She felt herself unraveling, dissolving into the exquisite pleasure of his kiss, of his touch. He deepened the kiss, a soft moan rumbling in his chest, and she met it with her own. A breathless sound of pure contentment. His fingers began a slow, sensual journey down her spine, tracing the delicate curve of her back beneath the water, sending shivers of delight through her. The world outside the small, candlelit bathroom ceased to exist. There's only the warmth of the water, the intoxicating intimacy of his embrace, and the thrilling promise of a night that had only just truly begun to unfold. The journey, she knew, was far from over. The journey, she knew, was far from over. His thumb found the hollow at the base of her throat, stroking gently, a silent query that vibrated through her. She leaned into his touch, her eyes heavy with desire meeting his. A slow smile spread across his lips, full of understanding and a shared anticipation that made her heart pound a little faster. "Ready to explore further?" he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her ear, sending a delicious shiver tracing a path down her side. She nodded, a soft, affirmative sound escaping her lips. He began to rise, the water rippling around them, reluctant to let them go. He helped her, his strong hands guiding her as she stepped out of the warm embrace of the tub. A plush, dark towel, warmed on a nearby rail, was immediately there, enveloping her in its softness. He dried her with exquisite tenderness, his movements slow and deliberate, each stroke a caress that awakened her skin. Her back, her shoulders, the delicate curve of her hips. He paid homage to every inch, his touch leaving a trail of warmth and longing. When he was done, he wrapped the towel around her, tucking it securely above her breasts, and then reached for his own. He dried himself with less ceremony, but no less allure, his sculpted form emerging from the steam, glistening and magnificent in the soft candlelight. She watched him, captivated by the play of shadows and light on his muscles, the sheer masculine grace of his movements. Her breath hitched slightly as he met her gaze, his eyes dark and hungry, reflecting the desire that mirrored in her own. He took her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers, and led her from the steamy sanctuary of the bathroom. The transition was seamless, a continuation of the dreamlike state they had entered. The bedroom was bathed in the same warm, flickering glow of candles, the air fragrant with a subtle, exotic scent that had been waiting for them. The bed, a vast expanse of crisp, white linen, looked like a cloud, inviting and soft. He drew her close, not yet fully against him, but near enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the subtle scent of his skin now mingling with the lingering fragrance of the bath oils. He reached up, his fingers gently untucking the towel, letting it fall to the floor in a whisper of cotton. She stood before him, vulnerable yet utterly emboldened by the warmth of his gaze, her skin tingling in the cool air craving his touch. His eyes traveled over her, a slow, appreciative journey that made her feel beautiful, cherished, and utterly desired. He didn't speak, but his look was a symphony of unspoken words, a promise of pleasure yet to come. He lifted a hand, his thumb tracing the curve of her collarbone, then down to the swell of her breast, not quite touching, just hovering, sending a jolt of delicious anticipation through her. Her nipples hardened, aching for his contact. With a soft sigh that seemed to carry all the longing in the world, he finally closed the small distance between them. His arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her flush against his bare chest. The contact was electric, a sudden intense warmth blooming deep within her. She melted into him, her arms finding their way around his neck, her fingers tangling in the soft hair at his nape. His lips found hers again, a kiss that was deeper, more urgent than before, yet still imbued with a tender reverence. It was a kiss of pure hunger, of shared desire finally unleashed. Her lips parted for him, inviting him deeper, and his tongue swept in, exploring, tasting, intertwining with hers in a dance of increasing passion. She tasted him, the faint saltiness of his skin, the fresh mint from the earlier tea, and something uniquely in him that made her dizzy with longing. He lifted her effortlessly into his arms, carrying her the few steps to the bed. She gasped softly, a thrill shooting through her at the unexpected gesture. He laid her down gently on the cool sheets, then followed, bracing himself above her, his eyes still locked with hers. The world narrowed to just them, their breathing, the soft glow of the candles, and the beating of their hearts. His hands moved over her, a slow, deliberate exploration. He caressed her shoulders, her arms, her sides, his touch featherlight yet profoundly impactful, igniting every nerve ending. She arched into him, her body a taut bowstring of desire, her fingers gripping his shoulders, her nails making light imprints on his skin. "Beautiful," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, as he bent to kiss the hollow of her throat, then trailed his lips down the column of her neck, to her collarbone, lingering there. She shivered, her head tilting back, offering him more access. His kisses continued their exquisite descent, finding the soft curve of her breast, teasing the sensitive skin around her nipple before finally taking it into his mouth. A moan escaped her, a deep, guttural sound of pure pleasure. He suckled gently, then more firmly, his tongue swirling, teasing, sending waves of sensation through her that pooled between her thighs. She tangled her fingers in his hair, holding him closer, lost in the exquisite torment he was creating. He moved to the other breast, giving it the same devoted attention, and she found herself arching, twisting on the sheets, her body crying out for more. His hand drifted lower, tracing the line of her hip, then moving inward, finding the soft skin of her inner thigh. His touch was light, almost hesitant, yet it sent a tremor through her. She instinctively parted her legs, an unspoken invitation, a silent plea. He met her readiness with a slow, deliberate touch, his fingers brushing against the soft, delicate skin that guarded her most intimate place. The first touch was a spark, igniting a fire that had been smoldering within her all evening. He teased, he circled, he stroked, his touch exquisitely precise, building the pressure, the yearning, with agonizing slowness. She gasped, her breath catching in her throat, her body quivering with a need that was almost unbearable. Her hips began to move, a primal rhythm seeking release. He leaned down, his lips brushing against hers, a soft, encouraging whisper. "Let go, my love, just feel." And she did. She let go of everything but the sensation, the exquisite pleasure blooming and spreading like wildfire. His fingers found her most sensitive spot, a gentle, rhythmic pressure that brought her closer and closer to the precipice. Her body tightened, a delicious tension building, coiling deep within her. She could feel the shudders beginning to ripple through her, a wave threatening to break. Just as she felt she couldn't bear another moment, he shifted, positioning himself between her legs. She felt the hard, hot length of him against her, a glorious friction that promised the ultimate fulfillment. Her eyes fluttered open, meeting his, and she saw the same intense passion, the same profound connection reflected there. He entered her slowly, deliberately, a deep sighing groan escaping him as their bodies finally aligned. She gasped, a sound of pure relief and overwhelming pleasure, her muscles clenching around him, welcoming him home. The fit was perfect, utterly complete, as if they had been molded for each other. He paused, allowing them both to adjust, to savor the profound intimacy of their union. Their gazes were locked, a silent conversation passing between them, a declaration of love and desire that transcended words. Then with a soft murmur against her lips, he began to move. Slowly at first, a deep, rhythmic thrust that echoed through her very core. She met him, lifting her hips, matching his rhythm, urging him deeper. The pace quickened, a rising crescendo of passion, their bodies moving in ancient synchronicity. Each thrust was a pulse of exquisite pleasure, each withdrawal an aching promise of more. She wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, wanting to feel every inch of him, every ounce of his passion. Her head fell back, lost in the sensations, the soft murmurs and gasps that escaped her lips, mingling with his own low groans. The air around them crackled with energy, the scent of their mingled bodies a heady perfume. The pleasure intensified, building to an unbearable peak. She felt herself spiraling, dissolving into pure sensation, her body tensing, arching, desperate for release. He watched her, his eyes dark with his own rising passion, his movements becoming more urgent, more demanding. With a final shattering thrust, she cried out, her body convulsing around him, waves of intense pleasure washing over her, leaving her breathless and weak. He followed moments later, a deep guttural roar escaping his lips as he poured himself into her, his body trembling, collapsing against her, his weight a comforting presence. They lay tangled together, spent and sated, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The candles flickered, casting long dancing shadows on the walls, mirroring the fading embers of their passion. He pressed a kiss to her damp forehead, then buried his face in her hair, holding her close, unwilling to break the spell. Minutes stretched into a timeless expanse. The world outside remained silent, respectful of their intimacy. Gradually, their breathing steadied, their heartbeats softened into a gentle rhythm. She felt utterly cherished, utterly loved, her body still humming with the aftershocks of their union. He stirred, lifting his head to look at her, a soft smile gracing his lips. "Perfect," he whispered, his voice raspy with emotion. She returned his smile, tracing the line of his jaw with her finger. "More than perfect." He kissed her then, a slow, tender kiss that was full of the lingering warmth of their shared experience. A quiet promise of all the nights to come. He shifted, pulling the soft duvet over them, tucking her closer into his side, her head resting on his shoulder. The faint glow of the candles eventually softened into the first pale blush of dawn, peeking through the curtains. She awoke slowly, enveloped in his warmth, the soft rise and fall of his chest beneath her ear soothing lullaby. The memory of the night before, vivid and potent, filled her senses. It wasn't just the passion, though that had been breathtaking. It was the profound connection, the way he had seen her, desired her, cherished her. She lifted her head slightly, gazing at his sleeping face, peaceful and utterly beautiful in the soft morning light. A feeling of deep contentment settled over her, a quiet, joyful certainty. This was more than just a night of passion. It was the beginning of a deeper journey, a bond forged in fire and tenderness. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. A slow smile spread across his face as he saw her watching him. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice still thick with sleep and affection. "Good morning," she replied, her voice soft and full. He pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Stay," he whispered, a simple word that carried the weight of 1,000 promises. And she would. She would stay, wrapped in his arms, knowing that the journey they had begun last night, though truly just starting, had already brought them to a place of profound happiness and belonging. The world outside could wait. Here, in the quiet intimacy of their morning, was everything she had ever longed for.